All right, guys. Well, today our guest is Maurice Daher. Maurice is a highly experienced registered clinical nutritionist and research pharmacologist with over 20 years in the field. He has a wealth of knowledge and has successfully helped thousands of individuals get their health back. His expertise lies in assessing patients' nutritional needs based on their medical history and lab results and developing personalized nutrition plans to help them achieve their health goals. And he is very adept at creating interventions to manage chronic conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. Maurice, welcome.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good to see you.
So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I think I had mentioned, when I first reached out that I came across your YouTube channel and it seems like we run in very similar circles. So I think today, just based off of the content that I've absorbed from you, we're going to probably touch on a variety of topics, most of which though probably will either directly or indirectly tie into the carnivore diet. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's get it done.
All right, man. Well, let's just kick it off this way. I mean, I would love to just hear a little bit more about your background. I mean, how did you get into this? What was like, growing up like for you? I mean, I always find it interesting to hear about people's path to teaching about nutrition and then specifically getting as deep as you do around carnivore and some of these other topics.
Yeah, for sure. So I think all started back in roughly 2002, actually, way back then. And, what we thought was healthy, the question is, was it really healthy for us? And so what happened is back in 2002, I had a little incident, and you know how you go to the doctor does their regular checkup and everything, and the first thing they actually end up seeing was, hey, you have high cholesterol, for example. So of course, me not knowing much about health and nutrition, even thought I was actually studying a little bit of nutrition. You listen to the doctor, and I end up being on statins. And I was on statins for about 1 year, 2 years, did not feel good, was losing a lot of muscle mass, was getting bruised up, foggy brain, you get a little bit more depressed, a little bit stressed. So you feel a little bit lost. And you go back a year down the road, 2 years down the road to your doctor, and they say, well, hey, we need to up the dose because it is a family history you have. I'm like, is there any other way we can do this? And he said, well, you can go vegan. You can eliminate all your dairy, all the eggs, all the meats, everything else. And I come from a culture as a Middle Eastern where we thrive very highly on protein. We eat liver and suet as a delicacy every single morning for breakfast here in Eritrea. So we've started this like culture, as a Middle Eastern since I was roughly 5 years old. We've always had the raw meat. We've always had raw suet. So we kind of grew up almost like carnivorous. Even thought it was not 100%, but still at least 70, 80% of our diet been like that. So that said, about 2004 or so, 2004, 2005, I went full vegan. The first year, yeah, you feel great because your body is going through different stages. You're detoxifying, you feel great, your cognition feels better, your mood, your gut, everything feels not so bad. First year, second year, mid second year to third year, that's when you actually start to decline. Lack of sleep, losing muscle mass, no strength, no energy. So it's almost like you're taking one step forward, 10 steps backwards. And you're constantly feeling the hunger, constantly chewing on vegetables. You're trying to actually maintain a good, healthy weight. Then I did that for numerous years because your doctor kept pushing you towards that level. And it's funny, a lot of the nutritional books that I was actually studying, they speak so highly about our vegetable intakes and heavy fruits and heavy grains, but yet they dismiss the red meat, the chickens, the fish, all the animal products. So in 2000 and skipping forward down the road, yes, I was overweight. I was close to about 200 pounds. I thought I had muscle, but my muscle mass was not that massive. And in 2015, I actually traveled overseas to see my son. When I came back, 7 days later, I ended up experiencing a heart attack. And it was very shocking because I'm like, well, I'm following a good diet. I'm taking statins. I'm doing, the full vegan lifestyle. Why the hell did I actually experience the heart attack? And I was actually driving when it was happening. My shoulders tensed up. I was having something super heavy in the center of my chest and my back. Could barely actually hold the steering wheel. While I'm on driving, looked at the phone. Where's the closest hospital? 11 minutes. I called the hospital and I just kept driving all the way there. I had to go through, unfortunately, two red lights because I was having a hard time breathing. I was having major headaches, shoulders pain everywhere. Stopped the car on the road, ran inside the hospital. The lady, she knew who I was right away because I was talking to her. She took me in, put me in a seat, and she stuck me with a whole two needles in my stomach. So what they do is they actually ingest magnesium sulfate into your stomach, so it actually vasodilates your arteries pretty much. And that was the story. That was exactly what kind of got me into it. And what happened is spent 3 days in the hospital, came out with about 4 different stents. So I have these fancy stents in my heart right now. And, got home. I was yellowish. I was pale, could barely walk. And I just sat outside in the sun for almost 10 hours, didn't eat nothing at all. Not one thing. And my parents came. They were actually living with me because they were looking after me as well too, to kind of make sure I'm okay. She's like, "What would you like to eat?" I'm like, "Give me a freaking steak. Like, I don't want no vegetables. I don't want nothing." So they went and they got a couple ribeye steaks, and that's all I had that one day. So I was actually fasting for almost about 24, 26 hours. I didn't eat anything in the hospital. It's funny, in the hospital they give you the orange juice and the muffin and an egg. I'm like, well, all that stuff is not really ideal for me. Like, give me something I can thrive on. So I got home, and after I had the ribeye steak, I'm like, that's it. You know what? For the next 5 months, I'm just gonna eat meat. And that's how actually I started the carnivore diet. I started eating meat every single day. Morning one piece, night one another piece. By the way, this is the first time I dropped automatically to 2 meals a day from coming from 5 or 6 meals, because as a bodybuilder they tell you gotta eat so much, but yet being vegan, you're like a walking cow, to be honest with you. You're constantly grazing all day long. You never stop, and you wonder why you feel bloated and tired all the time. So I had one steak in the morning, one steak at night, within about the 8 hour time frame, naturally fasting. And within about 2.5 to 3 months, dropped 40 pounds. My energy level just skyrocketed. Everything was going amazing, but yet I'm still taking 12 medications for life. And that's where I start to dig a lot deeper. I do have my nutritional background, do have my clinical nutrition. I almost put everything on the side. I'm like, now it's my time to actually know the truth. And that's what kind of got me from 2015 till today. I dug so deep into the heart disease and the saturated fats and the monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats and what people talk about and what everybody argues about, but yet nobody actually look at meat as the most bioavailable form for our bodies. And I tell this to everybody: every time you actually have a piece of steak, can you get up and run without actually feeling exhausted or tired? If you eat a plate of I don't have anything against vegans or anybody who has a different diet. That's their own personal preference. But you eat maybe a pound or 2 pounds of broccoli, you'll have to sit there for an hour to actually digest it. You eat a 10-ounce steak, you can get up and still exercise and run and don't even feel exhausted or tired. So that's what I call what is bioavailable to our body, and that's what I call like heavy dense nutrient to our body. So that's like almost like an overall picture of how kind of everything started with me.
Great. Can I ask, how old were you when you experienced the heart attack?
I was 33 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were extremely young. You were not an age in which we would, I'm going to say, air quote, normally find somebody experience a heart attack. I can resonate to some degree because my father had his first triple bypass surgery when he was 40. And
Okay.
and at that time, we thought, "Wow, how rare is this? This doesn't happen." We only heard of elderly people having heart attacks. And what I find so interesting, though, about your story is I was expecting that the heart attack preceded the vegetarian diet. I was expecting you to say that the heart attack was the reason why you went vegetarian. So it's really, I mean, it's that much more compelling to think about how, there were these warning signs early on, and the recommendation given was go vegan. You do that for several years, and then it leads up to a heart attack. And yet you are supposed to be on what many professionals, we'll call them, would consider to be the ideal diet to prevent such an event from taking place. With that being said, I mean, did you just feel after the heart attack took place, you mean you just had this innate desire or you felt this biological need to just have steak? I mean, you were basically throwing away everything you'd been doing for the past several years and overnight just making this decision that there is something wrong with what I've been doing this whole time.
Oh, 100%. Because, when I sat there and I actually start kind of thinking about it, you know, you always wonder, like, did we ever really just thrive off plants and off eating fruits? Like, look at me. I was looking myself in the mirror. I'm like, you have 100 things, 1,000 miles. Your mind is running, and you're trying to figure out exactly why did this happen. If that's what the data, and that's what doctors, because we come from a culture where you actually just listen to the doctor. If something's happened to you, go to your doctor. You have a toothache, go to your doctor. So we look at doctors are almost like God. Hey, they know everything. But so I start to question that. I'm like, do they really know everything? Like, I went and did my nutrition course, and all I did was almost I could have went to the library, grabbed some of these books, read them. I'm certified now because I've read them and I memorized them. But where did the data come from? So I start to kind of question everything. The more I question it, the more I start to find answers. And the moment I end up having that first steak, it's almost like a light switch to your brain. Okay, why do I feel so good right now eating the steak compared to me like 2 days ago I was eating apples and bananas and carrots, but yet you're constantly bloated. So why do I feel good? So that's when automatically things kind of clicked in my head. I'm like, you know what, there gotta be a stop to this. There gotta be something not right. It's all about almost becomes because you're so tuned in with your body that you know what's good and what's not, it seems like. And yes, like you were saying, when people experience a heart attack, they automatically, okay, your next step is becoming vegan. Well, mine was the opposite. Mine, I started being vegan, and this is what it took me because I became so deficient in so many different micronutrients that end up taking me to that stage.
So that's where I really want to go next because as we've just highlighted, right, your journey was the opposite of what most people experience in the sense of like making these nutritional changes. So right now, right, we're going to speak to the audience. You talk a lot about cardiovascular disease, how nutrition ties in. And you and I both know that so many people who first consider a carnivore, a keto diet, a low carb approach, animal based, anything that is going to increase their red meat consumption and also in turn fat, the number one concern is cardiovascular disease. It's how long is it going to be until I have a heart attack? Is this really safe for me? And I always laugh when people ask, is this safe? Yet these are oftentimes same people who are coming from a standard American diet where they're consuming large amounts of heavily processed foods, fast foods, fried foods. I mean, you name it, things soaked in seed oils. And yet the concern is over red meat because of how we've been programmed, right? I mean, you and I
100%.
both, we've been conditioned to believe that, hey, eating this way, eating lots of red meat, high fat diet is going to lead to a heart attack, which we've covered many times on this podcast, how that history came about. But that being said, like let's talk to the audience right now about why should they not be overly concerned about consuming uh, a high meat consumption or a high fat diet.
You know, I think one of the thing is due to the way we've been programmed, and the problem is, a lot of people have that fear because it's that fear mongering that's actually happening, whether doctors, pharmaceuticals, and big corporations and stuff. They put such a high fear on individuals that, hey, if you eat red meat, hey, it contains saturated fats. Hey, if you consume cholesterol, you could actually experience a heart attack. So there's so many things that are misled, and there's so many things is that either the doctor or whoever talks about this stuff did not really do very well research, or did not really do very well reading and explaining what is that scientific literature says, or who actually sponsoring these testing. There's nothing wrong with red meat, so how can I say this? When you do consume red meat and it does contain saturated fats, it's funny because the saturated fats is what keeps you satiated, is what actually gets rid of that craving, is what actually makes you feel good, is what actually makes you feel energetic and have the activated brain so you can actually function better. So anybody who's going to grab a piece of red meat, or let's say eggs, and that's my top two main food system, and I do eat 2 pounds of meat a day, I do eat about 10 to 15 eggs daily. Do I have to worry about cholesterol? No, I don't. Do I have to worry about the intake of saturated fats? No, I don't. Why? Because there's no oxidization. What causes heart disease is the flow, is the blood flow that is going through your arteries. Possibly something is actually stiffen up the arteries. The question is, what is it coming from? It's coming from man-made product. When you actually go out to the restaurant and you order a nice steak as a patient of mine, what do they put on the steak? First of all, it could be cooked with canola oil, probably fried with canola oil. They actually put some sauces, where the sauces are actually mixed with seed oils. You put sugar to actually enhance the flavor. You put possible MSG with it, or some companies they call natural flavors. These excitotoxins, these ingredients, these seed oils are what actually are causing that oxidization process. That's what's actually causing the meat to actually be looked at as something we need to fear, because all these top ingredients you put on it. If you just eat the steak by itself and you probably put some Himalayan salt on top, or kosher or sea salt, for example, maybe if you do like some herbs, peppers, and other things, or cayenne, for example, that's like a real steak. And maybe if you want to drizzle some animal fats such as butter, now that's a real delicious steak, not having seed oils and other man-made products on top of it. Because a lot of these man-made products, when you look at the ingredients, you have more than 10 to 20 different ingredients, and half of the ingredients you guys can't even read them, you can't even pronounce them. So why are we putting something in our bodies that we're not supposed to from the first place? That's not how nature intended to be. And I always tell this to everybody: anything you consume, try to stick to a single ingredient. You're having a steak, that's a single ingredient. You're having eggs, that's a single ingredient. The only thing is that sometimes I question is a little bit the cheeses, because some of the things they add, but most of the stuff they add could be certain enzymes to produce the cheeses. But these are like single ingredient formula. It's not where you have a steak where it has 30 different ingredients to actually make a steak.
That being said, in a lot of the research that you've done, like your personal research, I mean, have you come across anything that actually shows a correlation between dietary saturated fat, or I should say, I mean, dietary cholesterol and saturated fat and heart disease?
So through my research through the history, I did not come across any, let's say, legit studies or long-term studies or a massive amount of people with a study with related to saturated fats and cholesterol and other things. Now, don't get me wrong. Whenever a person has, let's say, an existing soft plaque buildup, or they have a specific factor showing that there is soft plaque inflammation, yes, you got your cholesterol, you got your calcium. They all gonna come and actually calcify that soft plaque, so it prevents that soft plaque from bursting. It doesn't mean if the doctor or the cardiologist goes in there to put a stent, he's gonna say, oh, there's cholesterol and fat, look, and some calcium that actually blocking your arteries. That's not the issue. The root cause is a soft plaque. The question is, why do we have soft plaque in the beginning? Cholesterol is actually there with the calcium to save your life, because they're actually calcifying the soft plaque from actually bursting and causing a heart attack. But of course, you have too much cholesterol and calcium building up, as well as going to cause another heart attack. But the problem is that soft plaque, how is it originated? Is it destroying your arterial glycocalyx? Is it destroying the flow of your arteries? What's happening? So these are the things we need to question. And of course, we always blame it on inflammation. But the question is, how did the inflammation get started in the body? You either eat to feed a disease or you actually eat to heal one. So what are you eating to activate that inflammation? No. So if we're focusing on a diet, let's say the diet is about 90% of the issues, that 10% it's sometimes environmental. But let's put environmental on the side and just focus on the diet. Your food intake that you're consuming, why is it activating an inflammation in the body? Now, even thought some certain population that I came across, roughly about 33% of the population, they have specific genes. But these genes, the only way they would actually cause soft plaque or possibly be at a high risk of having a heart attack or a stroke, only as well based on your diet. If your diet is clean, these genes are never going to be activated and cause an issue as well.
So what you're basically saying is, it's speaking right to epigenetics. The fact that, when it comes to epigenetics, we may have genetic predispositions. However, just like a light switch, I mean, the light doesn't turn on unless you actually flip the switch. And in this case, the flipping of the switch is our food choices. And then, so what would you say though are the biggest offenders or the things that are turning on the switch in a negative way for people?
Again, I will actually highlight this, and I would actually blame everything that is man-made, from seed oils, heavily processed, possible, I can say possible too much sugar in the diet, possibly overconsumption of certain foods, and a lot of us eat without realizing how much we're stuffing our system. It's not because we're hungry, it's just we are either bored and we just sit there and binge. And these are actually things that are happening in our bodies because of possible stress or depression. But yet, these dirty genes, I call them, the only way they can be activated is when you actually introduce something unknown to the body. As simple as that. Everybody is born with a different gene mutations or whatever it is, but they only get activated when you introduce something uncommon to the body. And yet we are introducing a lot of things uncommon to the body because, I get a lot of patients. Sometimes they tell me, well, hey, Maurice, today I just went and had some cold cut meats, was nice and delicious, and actually put a couple of eggs and everything. I'm like, hold on a second. Let's back up for a minute. Cold cut meats, what kind? How is it made? What's been actually introduced to it as ingredients? Because sometimes there's so many hidden ingredients and so many different food groups that people don't even realize and look after. Even thought it could be like a small percentage, but that small percentage could actually start something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And where I'd like to go next with this conversation and still stay on this topic of cardiovascular disease, I actually would love to cover two topics. One regarding people's blood panels, and then the other related to supplements. So just starting with the former, what should people really be concerned about their blood panels with respect to um, cholesterol measures, HDLs, LDLs, triglycerides? I mean, what do you break down or assess when somebody is beginning to do a carnivore diet, let's say, and now they're seeing their blood panels change in what might be considered a negative direction?
So everybody has this thing in their mind where they're just hanged on the cholesterol numbers. But usually, anybody I speak with, we do like a much more complex of blood panel testing, and we go after inflammation and soft plaque activators and other things that 99% of the doctors, cardiologists don't know how to interpret them. And sometimes they actually try to discard some of these testing. If you look at the cholesterol, I never really look at total cholesterol. I never really look at LDL cholesterol. The only thing that I might actually look at is your triglyceride to your HDL ratio. Even that, when we look at it, I like to kind of see an optimal level of below 1. And if a person is above 2 or 3, they are at a higher risk of possibly being insulin resistant. It's not there's actually hey, you might have a heart attack just because the ratio is off. No, it doesn't mean anything. All it does is just says you're insulin resistant. So the question is, let's say if you are on a ketogenic or carnivore, how much fats are you consuming? And how much are you utilizing? Because I look at fat and I look at sugar as an energy fuel. So if you're consuming a lot of these fats and you're not actually, burning off these fat molecules or these fat intake, that means you're actually taking a little bit more than what your body requires. So if you're taking 2 grams per 1 pound of body weight, hey, let's cut it down to about 1 gram or 0.75 just to see how's the ratios like. And the same thing if anybody is on a standard American diet and they're consuming a lot of sugars and we see high triglyceride to their HDL, well, how much sugars you're consuming? Because that's the energy fuel. And if you're not utilizing it, you're tipping the scale and you're actually adding more weight to your body because it's been used for storage. And we can tell that from getting the ratios. Now, putting the ratio, that's the only thing that I look at in the cholesterol history. Other than that, if I want to look at inflammatory factors, there's a lot more complex things we can look into. For example, myeloperoxidase, it's an MPO, LPPLA2. So these will actually predict some soft plaque. HSCRP for inflammation. We can look at your HbA1c levels to see where you're at as well too. Definitely. So we start to kind of trigger a lot more things, inflammatory factors, and sometimes we look at things such as clotting phases, such as whether your body has a methylation issue or not. So these are the blood tests that they're actually important. And there's roughly about 6 or 7 factors that can actually conflict, and possibly it's not whether making your cholesterol oxidize, it's whether you're destroying your arterial system, that the blood flow is not actually working as it should anymore. And that's when we start to see elevated numbers of systolic and diastolic for blood pressure.
Well, basically, I mean, what you're looking at and what your greater concern would be is the metabolic markers that are showing up in somebody's blood panels. And you're right. I think that we've been conditioned to believe that we have to just simply look at, what is our HDLs or LDLs and our triglycerides or total cholesterol, and that's the only concern. Whereas, yourself and others that we've actually had on this podcast, I just think immediately of Dr. Obadia, who, here's a cardiologist, a guy who actually gets paid for doing heart surgery, who is actively working to try to do less heart surgeries. And he points to exactly what you're talking about, which is the metabolic markers of health are probably of more concern and a greater predictor of heart health than anything else.
Oh,
So
100%. 100%. I agree. Yeah.
so with that, I know in following some of your content, and because you are so passionate about talking about cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, I hear you talk a lot about a variety of supplements. And I'm always curious because you have in the carnivore space, of course, a lot of people who are like, well, since you're just eating the most bioavailable nutrients that you could possibly get because you're eating animals, there's no need for additional supplementation or anything such as that. And I'm interested to hear a little bit more about your philosophy, your position on supplements, like how and why or when do you utilize them?
So when it comes down to supplementation, I get this question asked quite a bit. You're following a carnivorous diet. Why are you taking supplements? You've been on it for 10 years. The problem is, diseases and how can I say this? Deficiencies don't just happen overnight and it does not get fixed instantly. So if I was actually deficient that it kind of caused me a heart attack, there's no way I'm going to actually fix that deficiency just by switching to carnivore and eating carnivore that I'm actually going to get that specific, let's say, mineral that I'm deficient in. And as well, when you look at the cattle we buy and the meat and the eggs and all that stuff, I always question the source. Is the source allowing the chicken to actually free range and being pasture raised? Is the source allowing the cattle to actually eat grass fed and be grass finished? Are they getting the nutrient density that we used to get, 1,000 years ago? because I know when they've done research back in 1939 or 1943, they've seen that our soil is so depleted of so many wide minerals. So are we actually getting what we're supposed to be getting anymore? We don't know that. So we're pretty much almost guessing. And another thing is being on a carnivore diet or almost any other diet, sometimes we overutilize specific minerals to help with the absorption, to help the digestive juices, to help to actually maintain a healthy body. So supplements, they do play a huge role, especially with me having an issue 10 years ago, more than 10 years. It is going to actually benefit me. So yes, I do take supplementation, and I have a unique blend of supplementation that I take on a specific timing for my specific needs. I'm not saying that everybody should follow what I'm doing, but we have to be aware of what's in our bodies, and we have to be aware what deficiencies we have. And supplementation could be from vasodilation to kind of maintain the health of your arterial system, especially in my case, especially anybody who has actually had heart disease or experienced a heart attack. That's a must, because we want to make sure the blood flow is still working correctly, and we want to make sure that we are increasing proper nutrients at the cellular level. My second and favorite supplements always been magnesium, because magnesium has more than 400 different enzymatic functions in the body, but it does aid in the nitric oxide conversion from nitrate to nitric oxide, and it does help with the reduction of inflammation. But it has shown to actually reduce one of the soft plaque biomarker after 3 years of me testing it on a daily basis. But one of the big thing is 99% of these supplements, a lot of the people, a lot of the patients, they don't know how to consume them. They just look at the bottle and it says on the bottle take 500 milligrams. Well, how is a 200-pound person takes 500 milligrams and a 100-pound person takes 500 milligrams? And that's where my background in a little bit of pharmacology and some testing, where I actually deal with megadosing. I'm not here to maintain that deficiency. I want to actually fix that deficiency so I can drop that vitamin and move on. So I don't just take a specific dose that is actually mentioned. I would take probably about 10 times as much. And that's how it's always been my testing.
I really like that, and I definitely can resonate a lot with what you're describing. I'd love to know, I mean, what are you taking? I'm not going to ask you to prescribe for the audience or anybody out there, but I would love to know like what your personal regimen has been and for how long you've been doing it.
So since the incident till today, I do take a nitrate supplement every single day. I do take magnesium about 5 times a day. I take niacin. The only reason I take niacin because I did have a generic. It was called lipo small a, and it was in the upper 600. By taking niacin on a microdosing every couple of hours, was able to lower that down in the low 40s. Takes a long time, takes roughly about 5 years. So these are my top three. Then I do take NMN to activate your NAD plus, and I do take different forms of polyphenols. Now the polyphenols will actually help suppress the soft plaques, such as resveratrol and ellagic acid. And I also do add berberine with vitamin K2, anywhere between 10,000 to 25,000 micrograms of vitamin K2. And I do take vitamin D3, 1,000 IU per 25 pound of body weight in the summertime. In the wintertime, I take 1,500 IU per 25 pound of body weight. So these are my daily supplements. And I do have another supplement section that I actually take as emergency. For example, we all, even thought I am on a carnivore diet. I still practice what is called the carb load as well too, for my muscle building and for my glucose uptake. So when you do carb load, sometimes you could cause glycation or coagulation. So I have what is called my emergency stack. It's a vitamin E tocotrienols of 268 milligrams with vitamin C. And what that does is actually it prevents coagulation, and it prevents your blood from, let's say, becoming sticky from over consuming glucose. Of course, and I do have NAC and acetyl-L-cysteine. I use that as an emergency as well too. If I end up getting maybe feeling sick, or maybe I go to a gathering in and I know somebody's been coughing and I came home and I feel my throat is dry, I take 2400 milligrams every 3 hours for about 2 days and I fix the issue. Take glutathione once every 2 weeks. I do that for 2 days straight for detoxification. And yeah, one of my daily intake of another product that it's heavily missed. I believe everybody requires it because due to the environment we live in is an amino acid called taurine. And taurine is heavily found in your chest, in your eyes, in your brain. And every person that actually experiences a heart attack, their taurine levels are depleted. So I take 3000 milligrams 3 times a day of taurine as well.
Ah, that's interesting, especially regarding the taurine. I did not realize that gets depleted so significantly. Wow, that's interesting because I remember, going back probably well over a decade ago. I was taking supplements that had taurine in it, and since I've moved away from them, and oftentimes my personal position as well as that of Corey Beth is we do believe in supplementation and we look at it many times for people as a bridge. And I guess this
Mhm.
coincides with exactly what you were describing in that we can make these dietary changes because we know they're the right thing to do, but we also have to acknowledge that we've had years, sometimes decades of yeah, I don't wanna say incorrect eating, but not eating in an optimal way for our biology.
Mhm.
And in doing so, there's no way we're going to jump from this side of the bridge all the way over to the side that we wanna be overnight. And what you have to do is you have to build that bridge. And that's where supplementation can often come into play. We personally really like supplements that are built around gut health and working on correcting your microbiome, getting that in order because we know that when your microbiome is very healthy, then you're basically distributing health throughout your body because almost everything emanates from your gut. And we know today, most especially, your mental health. It all derives from we would call the second brain, right? That being
Yes.
your gut. And between your brain and the vagus nerve, like that's where all the communication is taking place. So between a better diet, one that is devoid of, again, foods that have lots of anti-nutrient properties, chemicals like you described, right? There's just a laundry list of ingredients in so many of the foods that we find today. And people don't realize, like, not only can they not read what the name of that ingredient is, they just have no idea what it does inside their body. And I don't even think we know fully at this point what some of these things do inside our body. We just can look back on history and say things have not been trending in the right direction. So, that said, I do like your position on the supplementation with regards to that. You have talked too in the past about gut health. So how does that also play into a lot of your recommendations and, these decisions that you make around nutrition?
Oh, 100%. Gut health is very important, as you said. And I always say, you either eat to fear a disease or you actually eat to heal one. And the gut health plays a massive role, how you feel. So every time I talk to a patient as well, when you eat, what do you feel? Do you feel constipated? Do you feel like you're belching? Do you feel bloated? Do you get diarrhea? Do you get soft stool? What is happening? Do you get headaches? So tell me all these things. And usually when I'm having, let's say, a consultation or talking to certain individuals, just by the way they describe things, I already know exactly what's happening. And I have always, my first initial step is to focus on the gut. You fix the gut, you're pretty much gonna fix, let's say, 99% of the other issues. Because exactly everything you put in your mouth, you're either gonna end up causing an issue or you're gonna fix that issue. And your microbiome plays a huge role. And the thing is, we are destroying our gut. We are destroying our gut in so many ways, from environmental, the stuff we use around the house, to sometimes the food we use and how is the food being wrapped and how is actually being prepared. So that plays a huge role. And most of the time, every person I talk to, because they don't have a good initial system and coming off a specific diet, I do put them, on digestive enzymes in the beginning beginning stages, because we need some of these digestive enzymes to actually help things start moving again in the gut. And I know sometimes I don't like, and I tell this to everybody, I don't like to put everyone on a lot of supplementation without actually knowing what is your blood work is like and how you feel after the first 30 to 45 days after starting on a new program, so we can actually start to work slowly. And I don't get me wrong, I don't push anybody to go to carnivore diet or any other different styles. I have almost 80% of my patients are vegans, and I have to work with them step at a time, but we've always introduced other things to actually compensate for some of the losses. But yeah, supplement, it is a good bridge to actually have, but as well your microbiome, I tell this to everybody, when you consume your food, no food should actually ferment in our gut. You should never feel bloated or feeling unwell, because the moment you feel unwell, your whole body feels unwell, your mind feels unwell, your overall functioning and the way you're doing things, you're not going to feel great. So the idea is you want to eat something to optimize your body. Don't eat for entertainment purposes. Eat to benefit these bacteria in your gut, because when you benefit these bacteria in your gut, you're going to be, it's going to be a game changer for you. You're going to be at top of your game no matter what, because just you're looking after them. Stop looking about, what looks good and what entertainment food we're having for tonight, or even think about food. Let it happen naturally. You get home, you don't have anything ready. What do you have in the fridge? You have meat and eggs. There's your dense nutrient food. I look forward to it. I've been doing it for 10 plus years now, and I still, every time I want to eat, I'm looking forward to that food, because I know exactly what it's going to do to my body.
I can resonate, because that's been my feeling over the last 2 years of being carnivores. I look forward to my meals compared to, my bodybuilding background, where I was only looking forward to my meals because I was hungry all the time and looking for the next thing. And I want to go there in a moment, but before we do, how does that messaging that you just described resonate with the vegans that you're working with? Because I always find it so interesting that many will go this vegan route because of they're trying to do the right thing for their health, and yet you describe many of the symptoms that many people I know who've been vegan or vegetarian before experience, which is the gut discomfort, and recognizing that things should not be fermenting in your stomach, yet this is what's happening constantly. You eat a meal, you feel completely exhausted afterwards. These are not normal things that we should be experiencing. So how do those people, do they eventually resonate with what you're trying to explain, and then start to shift their eating habits? Have you had any that have decided to drop being a vegan and eat carnivore, just let's just say more animal based?
So out of my most of them, at least I'm gonna say about 60% have already done the switch, and some of them are actually they're just introducing, they eat meat or they eat fish or eggs at least once a week. They still almost about 6 days being vegan, but once they actually add the eggs and once they actually add sometimes cheeses or fish, they feel good overall. And they send me an email, Maurice, we feel amazing today. I don't know what it is. I'm like, well, what did you have this morning? They're like, well, I had like 6 eggs. I'm like, well, there you go. She's like, I have no back pain. I'm not bloated. I don't have a headache. I'm in a good mood. And these are the type of messages I get. So it's kind of crazy. And, the funny thing is what I do with all my patients, because I tell this to everybody, every patient of mine, I will never leave your site unless you're 100% satisfied and cured and healed, because I know there's an answer to everything. So everybody has my WhatsApp number. I have more than 400 patients on my WhatsApp number. And sometimes I wake up like this morning, I had 82 messages just on WhatsApp. And I tell them all, I'm not going to charge you for it. This is part of me looking after you, keeping you motivated, keeping you on the go, and making sure I'm holding you accountable that you're actually following.
You know what? Why don't you just pick up real quick with when you woke up and you had 82 messages, if you remember where you were at with regards to just helping people to stay accountable.
Yeah. So what happened is, because I look after every one of my patients, and everybody has my WhatsApp contact, and the only reason they have that is The problem is, anybody that does a consultation or we have a meeting with a patient, pretty much most, let's say, doctors or whatnot, they'll give them the information. Here you go ahead and apply it. But there's zero contact with that person. And the person might maybe stick to it for a day, 2 days, 10 days. And after that, because there's nobody holding them accountable, they end up dropping. 6 months later, they go back and they do another consultation. I'm there for them because I give them my direct WhatsApp number for a reason. So this morning when I woke up and have more than 80 plus messages, I get sometimes overwhelmed and sometimes tired, but because I'm dealing with something very serious, because most of them are in regards to heart disease, and that to me is something very serious, very stressful on me, and it puts me in a lot of depressed states sometimes. And that's why I think, being on a carnivore and being focused and eating the right food, it helps me stay focused. So I wake up in the morning, I have a routine now. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and that's the first thing I do is start to respond to every single individual. Then I check my email. Then from my email, I go to my TikTok account. Then I go to my YouTube account, and I try to actually meet all the demands that is required for all these comments and questions. And that usually takes me a good about 2.5 hours in the morning. By the time I'm done, I'm overwhelmed. I'm a little bit tired. But yeah, I do this, and everybody tells me, well, Maurice, you're not really charging us for this. To me, whether you make $1 a day or you make $100 a day, are you thankful for what you have? I wake up every morning. If I can continue opening my eyes and see a bright light, I say, you know what, I'm still alive. I got a second chance for a reason to help out a lot of these people, and I'm going to do my best. And to me, breaking even and living off a grid location, that's what I care for. So if I'm feeling that way, that positive energy, I want to give that same positive energy to every one of my patients and actually help them realize that the food should not be used as entertainment purposes. The food should be used to actually satisfy your needs and your hunger. That's it.
Bless you, man. I love hearing that. Somebody who's just passionate about helping others, and you're living out your purpose, and we believe that that's why God placed us here. Everybody was created on purpose for a purpose, and I love when people are actually living that out like you are. So that's amazing. I would just love to switch gears now just for a moment. This was a topic that I've been waiting this entire interview to talk to you about. And it is on the topic of bodybuilding and muscle building. I mean, you also talk about that stuff. I love getting on here and talking with a lot of our guests who we dive deep into all of the nutritional related aspects of our health. But it's rare I get to talk to individuals who want to talk about muscle building and getting in bodybuilding type shape. That's what I did for 13 years. And even to this day, even though I don't actively compete, I'm still competing against myself. I'm still, of that mindset that even as I'm getting older, I'm about to turn 47, and I still want to put on more muscle. I still want to go to the beach and be pretty ripped up. So let's just, dive into that, because I think it ties nicely into a thing that you mentioned moments ago, which was carb loading, which is something that you never hear any carnivores talking about, because, well, carbohydrates are the enemy. They're the devil. They are, you name it. And I always hate to put food in a category. I mean, yes, we know that there is no value from heavily processed, refined carbohydrates, eating a high sugar diet, but I would love to just know a little bit more about why you are implementing these carb loads and how that fits into your overall fitness and maybe also bodybuilding type goals.
Oh, for sure, 100%. This is one of my favorite part of it because, when I started 10 years ago and I did lose a lot of weight being on a carnivore, and I've had a lot of influencers, to be honest with you. They come and approach me. He's like, well, you're not 100% carnivore. The stuff you're doing is incorrect. And you shouldn't be, consuming carbohydrates. I'm like, there's a reason for it, and let me explain it. Because every influencer or every, let's say, doctors that actually went carnivore, 4 or 5 years down the road, they end up start to add in fruits and carbs and other things, and they claim this part of the part of nature, which is fine. But I've been mentioning this from day one that when you go for carnivore, yes, you do maintain some muscle mass, but yet you lose a lot of weight. We do lose a lot of muscle mass as well too. And I've actually checked on that, and I've checked my muscle mass, and I did lose quite a bit. So about a year after I started the carnivore, in the ninth year, that's when I actually start to kind of implement what's called a carb load. So I would go 6 days eating perfectly clean carnivore, meat and eggs. That's my top two. On last day, which is the seventh day, my first meal will still be, a pound of meat. Sometimes I eat yak meat, and I put about 4 or 5 eggs. That's my initial meal. It's perfect. Then 6 hours after, when I'm gonna have my last meal of the day, technically it's supposed to be my carb load. That's when I actually hit the gym, and I do something in my training that exhausts my body to a point where, you know how it's like, you're lifting, you're vibrating, you feel like almost you're gonna puke, but you keep pushing yourself no matter what. Then in that short window, I would actually have my supplement. I would sometimes take the creatine, leucine, and I would take dextrose, because you have a 90-minute window, so you can actually refuel your glycogen storage. So that would be like my initial start. And now my last meal comes in being a carb load. I always tell this to everybody. I'm like, live a little, whether you want to have pizza, ice cream, or anything like that. But, try not to overdo it too much with the carbohydrates, with the processed stuff, because there is inflammation after that. Don't forget. So what I do is I pick the least anti-nutrient effect, the least anti-nutrient food. Let's say, for example, I pick rice, white rice. But the way I do it is I go 2.5 grams to 7 grams per 1 pound of body weight. So if I weigh 100 pounds, I'm consuming about 700 grams, for example, of white rice, as an example. And that's all I'll consume. It'll be possible white rice. Maybe I might put with it a little bit of, let's say, carrots, for example. But everything will be like nice and boiled, and I will sit there and eat it. I'm not looking forward to it, to be honest with you. It's just plain, but I don't add any protein. I don't add any fats, just strictly carbohydrates. So I don't cause no coagulation effect, glycation effect, nothing like that, just strictly carbohydrates. So the whole idea with that is to kind of refuel your glycogen storage, because yes, you do have the some energy and strength being on high fat diet, but sometimes you still need that glucose to actually put the extra strength in your body, because there is a difference in strength I've noticed. It might not happen to everybody, but it did happen to me and a few individuals. So that's where my carb load comes in. And the whole idea with the carb load, I get a lot of people say, well, I can eat complex and I can eat fruits and stuff. I'm like, no, not really, because what happened is when you spike your insulin, you want it to actually go back to normal level under 4 hours. And that's where simple carbohydrate comes in the picture, because if you do complex carbohydrates, you're gonna bring up your insulin, and it's gonna continue going up for 6-7 hours, and slowly it's gonna go down. So if you do exceed the 4-hour mark, you're gonna wake up the next day feeling inflammation. You're gonna get inflamed, you're gonna feel tired, you're not gonna feel good. But yet when you do something as a simple carbohydrates, a super spike of insulin and a drop, you've refueled your glycogen storage, you wake up the next day, you're feeling great. And of course, resistant starches such as white rice is gonna convert into fatty acids in your gut. So the next day you wake up with massive energy, and you'll continue having that massive energy for about 4 days, 5 days. About a day or two before you actually do it again, you're gonna notice that your body's actually starting to be depleted. Now here in the summertime, because I'm working and building my tiny house, I actually do a rotation of carb load. So I do the rotation every 5 days, every 5th day. So this way I can maintain that strength and the energy. And by doing this, I've maintained my muscle mass, I've maintained my size, I have not added any fat at all. I'm still in the low 6-7% body fat. That's like my little go-to meal, for example. Now, whenever I have family or friends visiting, that carb load could be sometimes be something else, where it could be like a scoop of ice cream or anything like that. But still, my main meal will always be that rice going to it.
I also will use rice occasionally, and in very similar fashion to how you're describing. Maybe not as structured as you have it, where it's, every seventh day or what have you. I'm almost doing it more on a feel as need basis. But what I noticed was that after about a year and a half or so of carnivore, that similar to what you described, I would not call it a loss in muscle mass, but what I'm going to say is a loss in muscle fullness,
Yeah.
which we know from that bodybuilding background that we used to always have a phrase, carbs for conditioning.
Yeah,
If you want your muscles to look the fullest that they can be, the key was how do you get in just enough carbohydrates so that you can maintain your muscle fullness? Because that muscle fullness is the result of water. I want to be very clear so people who are hearing this maybe for the first time understand
for sure.
it's, it's not the carbs themselves, it's that carbs, right? For every gram of glycogen stored in your muscles, you're going to hold on to 3 grams of water.
Yeah,
So if we are living this carnivorous lifestyle where we are never eating carbohydrates or just eating them in very, very trace amounts, I would say each day I maybe get 16 to 20 grams, but that's coming from the dairy that I'm
yeah.
consuming. It's not a source that my body is going to really utilize for maintaining muscle mass. Whereas that rice that gets stored in your muscles, now you're going to be able to store extra water inside the muscle cell. And by storing that extra water in your muscle cell, what's going to happen? You're going to look like you are fuller, like you have more muscle mass. And yet, this is not anything that is contributing to fat gain because it's under such controlled circumstances. And that is the difference between the bodybuilders who are living on carbohydrates every single day and feeling like, hey, because I train for an hour and a half or 2 hours and deplete all this glycogen that I could go eat whatever I want. And yet they just wind up fat or pre-diabetic or diabetic. What we're describing is a very controlled approach, but I just want to also highlight the fact that it's controlled, that this is not us utilizing carbohydrates or utilizing our workouts as a means of having a cheat meal. And I agree with you. Like every
Yeah.
so often, you may want to indulge, you may want to have something, but the concept of cheat meals, I certainly can't agree with when people say, "Oh, can I have a cheat meal?" It's like, well, wait, what do you mean cheat? Like you don't cheat with food. Number one, it's not like a spouse, it's not a test. You can't cheat on it. It's just food. And there's good choices, there's better choices, and maybe there's poor choices. And you have to just, determine what you're going to do along that spectrum, but be smart about it. So I really do. I appreciate that as much as you promote a carnivore diet, that you can also be willing to see that, hey, the carbohydrates may play a role for certain people under certain circumstances. And if you know how to utilize them, then utilize them.
No, no, for sure, definitely. You had it perfectly correctly on that, and this is not done for everybody. Like you mentioned, and like I mentioned, it varies per person, and it depends what that person's goal is, because all related to your goal. Are you looking to actually put on muscle mass, or you're just looking for overall, wellness and staying healthy? So kind of all that varies. And I do get a lot of questions sometimes asked about fruits and so on. I'm like, there's a reason most of the stuff is seasonal. So it doesn't mean we have access to it daily. Me living in Canada in such a cold environment, the only time I would possibly eat berries in a month of August. That's it. Throughout the year we have no access to fruits. We have access nothing. Even though we see it in supermarkets and places like that, but a lot of this stuff is imported. So try to stick more of what is in season, what is available, just so you don't actually break that cycle. And the same thing, if you're gonna utilize carbohydrates, what's the reason behind it? Is it to actually, like you're saying, give you that fullness look, or just because you miss it? So we kind of have to break things down, a little bit more in specific per individual's needs.
That's great stuff. Well, Maurice, this has been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I feel like I keep going for quite a while beyond this, just getting into the nuances of bodybuilding in particular. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I think we may have to come back and do this again and have a deeper conversation around body composition, resistance training. But in the meantime, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
So in the meantime, definitely, a lot of my patients, they do find me on YouTube heavily, and on TikTok as well too. These two platforms are my top, and I do quite a bit of live events almost on a daily basis. And I know I've been told this numerous times, but I give tons and tons of information. Every question I get asked, I go into so much detail so that person is satisfied. Even thought it is free to me is, I'm helping that one person out, and that one person, when he sees a difference, he's gonna get me 10 of his families and friends, and that's the whole idea behind it. And definitely, that's the best two connections, and we can go from there. And from there, they can actually access my website or email me directly as well too.
Excellent. Well, we're going to be sure to link all of that in the show notes so people could find you. And I just want to again once again say thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I really appreciate it, Mike, and thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet up. And definitely looking forward for some more future episodes.